Hello and welcome to Cult Movie Cult, where we watch and discuss the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. I'm Mark Dickerson.
And I'm Jeremy Fink, and this is the second episode in our series FRIGHT LITE, non-horror horror movies. Today we'll be talking about Jacob's Ladder from 1990.
Every day, Jacob Singer goes to work.
What's wrong?
It's one of those days.
And every day, he wonders what is happening to him.
Maybe it's the pressure, Jake.
They're like demons, Jess. They weren't human.
What were they, Jake?
Let me look at your hand.
You have a very strange line.
See, according to this, you're already dead.
Something's wrong, Jake. They're coming after me. I don't know who they are or what they are, but they're gonna get me, and I'm scared, Jake. I've seen them too.
Maybe the demons are real.
He's running 106 feet.
This is barbaric.
I can get rid of the demons.
Who are you?
I can block the ladder.
Where are you taking me? Where am I?
Where do you want to go?
Home.
This is your home. You're dead.
I'm not dead.
What are you then?
I'm alive.
Jacob's Ladder is a 1990 American psychological horror film, but maybe not a horror film, directed by Adrian Lyne,
Right.
produced by Alan Marshall, and written by Bruce Joel Rubin. The film stars Tim Robbins, Elizabeth Pena, and Danny Aiello. In the film, Jacob Singer's experiences before and during his service in Vietnam result in strange, fragmentary visions and bizarre hallucinations that continue to haunt him. As his ordeal worsens, Jacob desperately attempts to figure out the truth.
Mm-hmm. This is a heavy one,
Mm-hmm.
certainly in terms of the thematic subject matter and the type of films that we generally discuss on this show. Like another description I saw for it was mourning his dead child. A haunted Vietnam
Mm-hmm.
war veteran attempts to uncover his past while suffering from a severe case of disassociation. To do so, he must decipher reality and life from his own dreams, delusions, and perceptions of death. So, yeah, it's definitely, like I said, a little bit heavier, maybe like thematically than what we normally cover. But I would say this is still very much a cult film.
Oh, for sure.
In keeping with everything else we do
this
talk about.
It definitely passes the cult movie test for 100%.
It has a lot of cred. It's and rightfully so. And I had forgotten how much I personally enjoyed it until enjoy is a weird word for this movie, but
but
really
fair.
liked this movie. Yeah, until I rewatched it, for the show, and I hadn't seen it in years, but it just really like struck me and really stuck with me. Like one of those instances where I watched the film and I was up at night, like thinking about it, it was one of those things. So, really great film. And was this your first time seeing it, or had you seen this movie before?
No, so this is my second time seeing it. I came to this movie originally in a kind of weird way. My background in high school, I played music, particularly rock and metal music. And I remember
you mentioned this.
Yeah, the band Avenged Sevenfold had this music video that was really popular, called Nightmare, where it was the lead singer basically going through the scene in Jacob's Ladder, the famous scene of him going through this kind of rotted out, decrepit hospital and all these strange, terrifying, demon amputees
crawling around.
Just kind of invading his space and the wheels rolling over limbs. So, I remember I saw that music video and it really struck me in a big way. I didn't, when I was younger, I wasn't really as into horror movies or anything like that. It kind of was something I got more into as I entered early adulthood. And it really it freaked me out. I remember the music video was terrifying to me. And, in the comments section on YouTube, everyone was talking, oh, Jacob's Ladder. And I had no clue what they were talking about and did a little research.
So that's how you discovered it.
Yeah, I don't think I actually watched it in high school. I think I watched this for the first time a little more recently than that. But yeah, this was one of those movies for me as well. I remember enjoying it the first time I watched it, being sufficiently, freaked out and disturbed and having that kind of
Disturbed, that's a good...
Yeah. But watching it this time, I was kind of really taken with how contemporary the movie felt. Particularly the thing that I kept coming back to is just the editing of this movie.
The editing is great. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the thing. It's
adds
just
so much.
the way I think about there's a South Korean movie called The Wailing. Have you seen that, Mark?
No, I haven't.
No, it's great. It's actually kind of could fit into this series, although it's a little bit more of a horror movie, but kind of blurs the lines. But it does a similar thing as Jacob's Ladder, where it feels like it's tough to put this into words, but the story moves, the pieces of the story, and even from scene to scene, move in a way that's really kind of inexplicable. You know, it doesn't feel like it has that like A to B.
It's like, how did we get here?
Yeah, exactly.
Here kind of
it almost has that feeling of like which I guess is, you know, kind of on the nose, but not on the nose, on the mark. Kind of that feeling almost of like when you're in a dream and you don't really know how you've gotten there.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that's so cool with this movie, because the way it starts, you know, the opening scene of this movie, at least I believe. You good?
Is it the Nam scene or the scene after that?
So I'll go back. So,
okay.
So the opening scene of this movie, it opens in Vietnam. You know, with these soldiers kind of hanging out and then getting into this battle, doesn't feel that out of place for an opening scene. Like, it feels, you know, it kind of places you. But then as soon as we go to the New York stuff, you really kind of lose your footing. And I think what's so interesting is it's kind of presented as a dream, you know, a dream in that sequence, but it's such a long, the opening sequence is so long and not dreamlike. It's so realistic. Like, there's nothing, you know, there's nothing totally out of the ordinary in that opening scene.
I feel like you never know what is a dream in the movie, and that's kind of what makes it work.
Yeah, it kind of just moves you right through it without explaining it.
It does. Yeah, the momentum and I found myself like enthralled by it and just really focusing on it without having to, you know, try to focus on it. So it was really like it was a really good experience, I guess we'll call it. You know, we don't usually go beat by beat story-wise for these films that we discuss on the show, but you know, where we go through all the scenes and discuss each character and each, you know, exactly what happens and everything like that. But I do want to at least do that a bit for this film, and the reason is because the moment-to-moment strange things that happen in the movie is they are sort of the movie in a way, and because like as you described, Jeremy, the movie. I wouldn't call it. It's sort of linear, but it's you know, it's very vague in the way, again, that you don't really know if you're watching a dream. You don't know if you're watching Jacob's the main character's delusions or what's going on inside his head. You don't know if it's actually real. You know, so it's that's what makes it unique, I think. But it's also why I wanted to kind of dig into these parts that we're going to be discussing scene by scene in a way, and I want to at least touch on all the major visions that Jacob experiences, because I think that's important, obviously. So as you said, Jeremy, the film begins during the Vietnam War, towards the end of it, so it's 1971, and we see Tim Robbins' character, Jacob, and he's in a pretty tense war scene, but I found it interesting right off the bat that it's not the usual type of war scene. Well, so it is a scene that you would see in a war movie where, you know, everyone's kind of being buddy and teasing each other and sitting around and everything. But usually that would come in later. So it kind of has this ominous feeling, right? It's like you're like, something's going to happen here. But I think nothing can prepare you for what actually does happen. So, I mean, eventually what you learn throughout the movie. But so it's, again, not the usual type of war scene. But it does start with the troop of men. They're all like goofing off with each other, and then suddenly one of them starts convulsing, and that's like the first instance of something very strange happening in the film. And at the same time, there's an attack that happens on their camp, and there's some gruesome imagery here of wounds and injuries and death. And one of the characters is just sitting there watching all this, and he does come back later as well. And he's clearly just frozen by the fear and unable to move or comprehend what's going on. And Tim Robbins' character, Jacob, he's stalking after the attackers, and he gets stabbed by a bayonet. And from there, it just cuts. We were talking about the editing. From there, it cuts right to what's present time in the film, which is 1975. And we're in New York, and Jacob's on a subway train. And Jeremy, I like the signs on the inside of the car. where it's advertising the Big Apple, and then right next to it it just says hell, like really big letters. It was like, because we've talked about this before in the show, how New York, really up until the 2000s, it was a very different place. Would you agree with that? It had a reputation of being a bit grungy and dirty and dangerous. So before it was quote unquote cleaned up.
Though I would say seeing a poster like that now, even on the subway, wouldn't be totally out of place.
Right.
Like
That's why you said it felt very contemporary, right?
Yeah. You could still, like, the New York of this movie doesn't feel contemporary, but that moment, it was funny because I was like, that's a little on the nose, but then I was like, no, like, I've definitely seen that kind of thing in subways before, so it's just a deliberate choice. It's believable.
But also, it does make sense to the thematic subject matter of the film. So, but yeah, I just thought that was kind of like an interesting moment. And this is the first of many strange and utterly horrific visions that Jacob has when he's on the train, and he sees something. Now, at first I wasn't sure what I was looking at here, and I guess you're never really supposed to know exactly what you're looking at with these visions that he has, right? But I do want to go through, like I said, and try to decipher these best we can, because they are so utterly bizarre. But this is, I guess, it resembles like a tentacle or something that's coming out from one of the passengers, or where the seat is in the on the train. And then there's there's lots of haunting imagery in this movie, but I thought this opening scene was really great, how it sets the scene. It definitely feels like a dream. And it actually, I've learned later when I was doing some research on the film that it was based on a dream that the writer had.
Interesting.
It's almost like beat for beat what the exact dream that he had when he was on the train, and then he gets off the train and everyone's gone, and he tries to leave. He tries to use the exit, but he can't. It's like blocked off, and he's in this empty station by himself. He goes down the tracks with the puddles and the rats, and it's just very eerie. And then right before he almost gets hit by the next oncoming train, we see. So he almost gets hit by a train, and then we see he kind of like turns around and looks, and it's like this another vision right at the beginning, where it's like a person standing there looking out the back of the train at him, but he looks like disfigured and definitely demon-like. It's definitely creepy as hell, that part. Yeah. So the notion I got, because again, it's been a while since I saw the movie, and I'm trying to remember things about it as I'm watching it, but I feel like it definitely touches on the post-traumatic stress element, because you see the war scene and then you see this, so you kind of just put two and two together. But we start to learn that there is more to it than that. Definitely with his son that starts to come into play.
Yeah, I think what's cool is
just failed marriage.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's kind of cool with it too is because like at this point, and then that's why it is that thing of like, we're talking before, because when you start talking in abstractions like this, is similar to what we talked about with Eraserhead of how you pull it off and make it believable when you're kind of functioning in dream logic. And I think something that's really cool with this one is because we get that opening scene in Vietnam. And then we get him waking up. I almost kind of took it as like a flashback. I don't know if you felt the same way, but that really grounded us in this thing. And that's the thing. It's like, I think what makes this so surprising, these opening scenes here, and what kind of drops you into it, is you go in kind of feeling like, you've seen this kind of bizarre thing in Vietnam, but then you see him kind of waking up, and you're like, all right, maybe this is just some kind of PTSD thing where he's, the convulsing and the strange things that are happening in that opening scene are kind of a mix of dream and reality, but you accept it. And then he wakes up on this train, and at least for me, I'm like, okay, now we're grounded. Now we're going to start our real story.
Now the film begins.
The film begins, and now we can exist in reality. And then you're thrown into something so bizarre, and it's just so it just kind of pulls the rug out from under your feet. It's so destabilizing that for me, at least from that point on, I was just totally like on edge. I was just like, I don't know where this is going, because we are clearly existing in a space that I understand even less than this character does.
Exactly. Yeah, the film keeps playing with you, for sure. That's and until the end, really. Yeah. Which is quite the feat to pull off, honestly. But they do it well. And so at this point, we are kind of thrust into his life. So now he does wake up. To make things even more confusing, it's like he is also constantly waking up during the movie, too. Yeah. But he wakes up, and he's, again, it's 1975. So it's after the war. We do learn in the scene he's with his girlfriend Jezebel, and we learn in the scene that he has a son who died before he had gone into the war, and he has an ex-wife who he clearly still has feelings for. And, he's looking at photos, and I think he comes across a photo of his son. And Jezebel is pretty terrible in this movie, but I think she's supposed to be. Again, what you start to learn about everything.
Which is ironic, because I was looking it up because they make reference to the fact that it's a biblical name, and Jezebel means pure or virginal, which is kind of funny that his, we don't know exactly what happened. We understand there's something with the death of his child, but we don't know what happened between him and his wife. But it's kind of, we are supposed to, at least I interpret it, that maybe there was some kind of infidelity or something, and that's how we ended up with Jezebel.
Right.
And that, just
exactly,
that her name is she's supposed to be the pure and virginal one, but she's the, the woman who he's maybe cheating with. It's like, it's just kind of a weird backwards approach.
Yeah. Everything has a purpose in this film, I've noticed. So that, I think that name is not an accident. And she says something like, I don't like. So when Jacob's looking at the photos, he, obviously gets upset, and she says, "I don't like things that make you cry." And she like snatches the photos from him, and takes them right to the incinerator, and completely destroys them, burns them. So pretty harsh, but you're like, okay, because you're not really sure what to make of things yet. So we see that he's a postal worker, just living like an average life, and kind of going about his day. And then suddenly a car chases him down, and again we see a disturbing-looking, almost dead-looking person, or people, in the car, just kind of staring out at him. Again, reminiscent of the man in the back of the train. So already we're seeing these images of, I describe them as sort of dead-looking, because they do look like almost charred bodies, or something like that, which again could relate back to the war thing, or there could be a lot of interpretations for this, but of what we're seeing here. So he tries to, at this point, get help from a vet doctor, and the nurse who's helping him, like, her hat falls off, and there's like some sort of strange growth kind of coming out of her head. So all kinds of like interesting things. There's always something like in the scene that's just kind of catches your eye or makes you go, interesting. So even like just a simple scene of him talking to a nurse is strange in a way. And going with that sort of dreamlike feel throughout the movie. And he tries to see the doctor, but they say they don't know who the doctor is, and he starts getting chased by the guards. So it's all very surreal feeling. And he's only able to find a support group, and no one seems to know the doctor that he's looking for until the group leader tells him the doctor died in a car accident. And he just says he blew up. Yeah. Which is like so bizarre, but so I'm like, okay, spontaneous combustion, or and he's like, what do you mean? And the guy just responds, I don't know. So it's very intriguing, this film. I mean, even from that scene too, I was like, wait, I want to know what how did he blow up? Like, and you do eventually, I guess, kind of find out, yeah, which we'll get to later. And I like the line, New York is filled with creatures. That's a good line. It's very appropriate for this film. Although Jacob describes them more as demons trying to kill him. I mean, do you see them? I don't know. At this point in the film, did you see them as demons, or what were you seeing these visions as, I guess?
I don't know. It's weird. I kind of found myself like not really even defining them. Like, I don't know. Like,
they're hard to define, right?
Yeah, I kind of just saw them as like, I don't know, just terrors. You know what I mean? Just like,
like animalistic, like.
Yeah.
Well, the party scene, which I guess we should talk about too, because that's pretty infamous from this film. There's like a tail, I guess, that comes out. Like the people that are dancing on the dance floor with them, they they start to have tails, and there's birds with demon teeth kind of flying around. So there's definitely a lot of like animal-like imagery. Yeah. Just like very savage kind of things. And also during the scene at the party, Jacob has a woman read his palm, and she tells him that he's already dead. Yeah. Which is, strange. But we don't think much of it.
And she's very lighthearted about it.
Yeah. She's just like, oh, you're dead.
Oh, you're dead. And just like laughs.
Yeah. And like, because, reading palms, I mean, I don't know how most people take that, but, it's not always taken as the most serious thing. Yeah. But in this case, I guess, she was right. On. Or, and then we do have some more flashbacks to the war here. Now, the film never really goes into politics of the Vietnam War, which a lot of films have explored, a lot of documentaries and things like that. But it's still sort of there, especially later on, I think, with the conspiracy theories and things like that. Yeah.
Well, and the obviously, full spoilers ahead as everyone listening to this hopefully knows by now. But the in the closing credits, there was a title card that was about these experiments that apparently, and I can't verify how much of this is true or not true because I'm not a Vietnam expert and I've not done research.
Oh, okay.
But there is a title card right at the end of the movie that says like, the government was doing these kind of experiments and presented it as fact. Once again, I'm not presenting an opinion on it.
I'm pretty sure that is not true because I had to look it up, or either that or it came up when I was doing the research. But I think that was pretty much just false. But there are conspiracy theories out there. I'm sure about war-related activities and things like that. So, but we'll get to that for sure. So the film, it certainly keeps you on your toes because now we have that party scene and a flashback to the war, and then suddenly now we're in a whole nother life. We're back in his old life. We have that sequence where Jacob is putting his sons to sleep, and I guess we see he has multiple sons, and the son that supposedly is dead is there. So it's like, okay, is this a flashback? But then he starts mentioning things, and you're realizing that maybe everything we've seen up to now has been the dream, and maybe this is where we're going to be going from here on out. But it's not as simple as that because we're kind of constantly going back and forth between things and his old life and his life now. But he does try to seek help. He tries to figure out what's going on with himself. The doctors tell him he has a virus. That's about as much explanation as we get for much of the movie. So again, it's like, another way you could take the film, at least initially, is that maybe he's terminally ill or, he has some sort of sickness that's making him see these things. That's initially what I thought when I saw the film, was like he was maybe seeing visions because of like he was having a deteriorating situation or something like that. I mean, his sanity, another thing is like, is his sanity declining? Are these things actually happening? So, and then eventually he gets a call from a friend, an old war buddy. It's one of the men we see in the beginning of the film, and he meets up with him, and he tells him something's wrong, like I'm going to hell. They're coming after me, and this is where the conspiracy theories kind of begin in the film. It says that they're following him and coming out of the walls and things like that. So things that Jacob has experienced, and just a lot of paranoia and again conspiracies and fear. And he tells him like I've seen them too, and when his friend goes to leave, he turns the key in his car and the car explodes. So again, that probably alludes back to what he meant when he says that the person exploded, the doctor that Jacob was seeing.
I do think that part of the movie is particularly interesting for me because it really feels like they're doing something about it for the first time. Like until that point, I feel like, not that Jacob's been a passive character, but it kind of feels like it was all just so strange and overwhelming that there was kind of nothing he could do to fight it. And I think it's cool that they worked in this little section of the movie because it feels like, like Jacob is fighting back. And it kind of gives you...
finally like somebody knows what he's going through or like understands.
And it kind of puts, at least for me, it kind of... Because I think, once again, with a movie like this, the challenge is always grounding it. And I think for me, what that part did is it really made me be like, all right, this is when they solve the mystery. This is when we get answers as an audience. And it kind of keeps you it keeps you in the realm of mystery and not nightmare.
Right.
But meanwhile, it's still feeding you constant nightmare imagery, and you're still in a nightmare.
Yeah.
But it's that thing where you're like, I want to know what's happening.
My initial thought on this movie, Jeremy, you bring up a good point here, because when I'd seen the film, I really liked it. And then now whenever I would think back on it, I would think, that's a movie with just like weird imagery that just keeps popping up and like doesn't really mean anything. But seeing it this time, I just have such a totally different view of it, and I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, everything has a purpose, and the momentum. We talked about that a little bit, but the director and everyone, the writer and the editing certainly, which we're going to talk about more in depth. But everything keeps the movie moving along, and the performances are great, and keeps it moving along, and you start to understand more and more, but also understanding less at the same time. But it definitely has a forward trajectory. And at this point, it really does, because we have that scene where his old war buddy explodes in his car when he starts his car. And then from there, that is when Jacob starts to fight back. Like, he's like, I'm going to do something about this, People need to know what's going on, even if he doesn't fully understand what's going on himself. So they have a funeral scene where all the all the wounded, I guess everyone that was in his troop that survived, they're all there, and they're kind of saying that they have these similar occurrences with these visions. So they're all going to kind of get together, and they're going to, I guess, sue the army, right? Sue the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
To bring attention to what's going on, because they know something's going on. And so Jacob's paranoia increases, and they get this lawyer who is Jason Alexander.
Yeah. Exactly who I would go to.
Or sort of at the beginning of Seinfeld, George Costanza.
Exactly who I would go to if I wanted. Yeah, if I wanted to sue the U.S. military.
Yeah, you're in good hands with George Costanza. But he's good in this role. I feel like he's like, I don't know. He's just
he works.
He's like, you guys are crazy. Yeah.
There's the one part when they're talking for the first time, and he's just like eating chips.
Yeah, he's
just talking about how much money they'll make.
Seinfeld a lot too.
It's just a great Jason Alexander moment.
like it's not about the money. He's like, yeah, sure, okay,
sure. Well, we can make a lot.
Yeah, he's good in this. And then, but even Jason Alexander at this point, his character, eventually when he's talking to Jacob on the phone, he says, all your buddies have backed out. There's no case here. The government has no record you were ever in the army. So, yeah. It's just things get again stranger and stranger, and there's that operating scene I wanted to mention where the surgeons are there, and they're essentially they pretty much chase him down and strap him down. It's very reminiscent of like, I don't know, something like Brazil, the movie Brazil, or obviously like A Clockwork Orange, something like that, where they strap him down and they, I guess, essentially lobotomize him there, right? And even his girlfriend is one of the surgeons, just to make it even more crazy, just to add extra horror to it, I guess. And then again in this scene they tell him he's dead, so it's like, they are telling you, it's not like a secret, it's like they are, but again it's like you don't know whether to believe it or what. So he's in the hospital, and his ex-wife and his kids come in to see him. So again, it's like, is this, which life is this, and what is real? And we don't know if any of it is. And now, so this is like the ending trajectory of the film. So Jacob is approached by a very distressed man who's been following him from a distance. And so I guess he also dragged him away from Paul's burning car, but I guess I missed that part. But so he introduces himself as Michael Newman. He tells a story of having been a chemist with the Army's Chemical Warfare Division, where he designed a drug he called the ladder. So that's where Jacob's ladder comes from. There's also a biblical reference there that I'm forgetting, but Jacob's ladder refers to something in the Bible, I think. But so this massively increased aggression in the army, and Michael claims that to test the drug's effectiveness, a dose was secretly given to Jacob's unit before the battle, causing some of them to turn on each other in homicidal frenzy. So that is kind of what we're seeing in the beginning. So and they actually do cut back to the scene, I believe, but you can look at the scene with new eyes now, and like what is actually going on, and it all sort of makes sense in a horrifying way. I mean, it was horrifying to begin with, that scene, but now you understand that the soldiers are essentially killing each other, and just sort of like freaking out and convulsing, having these visions and things like that. So everything at this point, and again, like when I had seen the movie before, I didn't remember that they actually did explain things more than I realized.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't remember. Same thing, kind of in my mind, because it'd been a while since I've seen it. In my mind, I had this movie totally wrong, because I thought, for some reason in my mind, I think it was just because I was so traumatized by that video in high school, that in my mind I'm like, oh, this is a movie about a guy who gets captured by some evil doctors, and it goes from there. I thought that was the first act.
I mean, that does.
I was like, I forgot. Like
that does happen, but
yeah. But yeah, it
does a good job of mixing the disturbing imagery with like an actual like plot that's unfolding, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty fleshed out, and I think what's cool is it's like, even at the end of the movie, even though you get this concluding scene that most people, I would imagine, kind of take as fact because it's presented in a very sober way. I think it's all basically. Let's talk about
the last scene, because that's pretty much where I was anyway. My notes. So and then we'll get to that. But so Jacob returns to his family's home, and this is like the last scene in the movie, where he finds Gabe, his deceased son, and he takes him by the hand and sort of leads him up the staircase into this bright light. So just the imagery of heaven and going, ascending after death. These are things that just kind of like inherently people know, right? So I think that's pretty. I actually thought that was pretty cut and dry as it was, but you actually get a scene following that in the triage tent. So now we're back in 1971. We're back essentially right after that first scene.
So the beginning of the film,
in the Vietnam War, at the beginning of the film, and we see the military doctors there. They have Jacob there, and they declare him dead. So it's after the attack happened, after he got the bayonet into him, and the doctor notes that Jacob had put up a tremendous fight to stay alive, but looked very peaceful in death. So they kind of put a wrap on everything. They kind of tie it up nicely, and they essentially tell us what we've been seeing this whole time, which is, I guess, a right before death sort of dream, like a pre-death dream, or maybe at the same time, who knows? And there are, there's lots of research that's been done where people that have near-death experiences, like they have visions, and people, even when they study people's brains that are dying, like they realize that the brain continues on in certain ways after death. So it's realistic to actually think that someone would have visions or dream like scenarios going on, which is essentially, I guess, what we've seen, right? I mean, it's kind of what the movie's telling us. I don't know. Do you think it's ambiguous at all, or do you think it's pretty cut and dry?
Well, that's what I was getting into. I think it's kind of interesting because that last scene is shot in such a kind of sober, straightforward way. I think it's, there's, I don't remember it shot for shot, but I know they kind of end on a wide, and it's kind of much more traditional coverage. Yeah. I once again don't know for sure what lens lengths they were
surreal
using.
going on.
But yeah, it looked like the lenses were pretty normal length. There's no weird distortion around the frame. No crooked, no Dutch angles, anything like that. Like we've seen kind of throughout the rest of the film, the camera is mostly locked down on a tripod through that scene. It's very stiff. So like I think we're kind of led to believe that okay, this is the reality of the thing. But once again, it's like one of the things that's kind of fun about this movie is that we have created essentially, let's see, I want to say 3 different timelines because there's the war timeline. Yeah. There's the, Jacob's family, his family timeline, and then there's the kind of surreal timeline with Jezebel. And in a way, all 3 of them kind of, you could point out to wrapping up in their own way. You know what I mean? It's kind of, and not that there's like a clean, this is what happened, wash your hands, wrap up. But, in theory, with a movie like this, what's kind of fun about it is there's that scene and the doctors walk out of the room and he's left lying there. And then I could easily see us just cutting to Jacob waking up somewhere else. And if you know what I mean? Like
he wakes up again.
Yeah, and it's just in a different.
Why not?
It could just wake up in the Jezebel timeline
different
again.
Reality.
And that's cool because I think we have the thing of him walking up the stairs. That feels like the end of a movie. That could easily be the last scene of a movie. It's like there were multiple times where even the scene with the doctors and Jezebel being one of the doctors, it's a horror movie. That's the last scene. So it's exactly. So it's one of those things where this is a movie that kind of doesn't feel like, which when we're talking about movies that obviously this is kind of taking a more Judeo-Christian approach to the idea of death with the idea of heaven and hell. But I think that in that philosophy, it's not an ending. It's it's just a continuation of a spiritual journey. And I think one of the things that makes this movie fun is even though we get this kind of very sober, this is what happened ending, it really, at least in my mind, left me thinking about, is that really the ending? Is that really what happened, or is that just is that just an
exactly? You still
ideological
don't really
piece?
know, and yeah. And even at the end, like you mentioned, Jeremy, there's that little tag where the text comes on the screen and they tell you about these different experiments that were done on soldiers and things like that. Which again, apparently is not based in fact, but I mean, again, there are definitely conspiracy theories out there.
Yeah.
Well, and these kinds of things.
Even now, if we're picking this movie apart and throwing our conspiracy theories at it, they talk all about how the scientists and the doctors were working on these soldiers to do these experiments, and the last scene of the film is 2 doctors working on Jacob. So it could even go into the idea of because we do get that title card at the end about the experiments, are these doctors just there to help Jacob, or were these people part of the conglomerate
part
that
of
were, you know,
That's what I
were they
thought
partially
initially, yeah.
responsible? So I think it's one of those things that, which, you know, these, I'm not going to say any of the other movies because I don't want to spoil, but I think these kind of twist endings, you know, like these M. Night Shyamalan, I guess I will, but, you know, if by now you don't know that M. Night Shyamalan has twists, where have you been?
If you don't know that. Then
and exactly. I won't say what the twists are, but those kind of twisty movies were very popular in the 90s with these twist endings. But, like, for me, this was one of the twist endings, I guess if you can call it a twist ending, that kind of felt the least definitive. Like, it didn't feel like the twist was there to just have you be like, oh, you know, it just kind of felt like it was just an alternate idea that it was working through in the possibility of Jacob's life and afterlife.
This movie has already so many twists and turns to it, and so many like fake outs, sort of, that adding conspiracy theories into it just made it like over the top, like, but in a good way. Like, I was like, all right, we're going full in, like, you know. And again, that is kind of the trajectory of the, like, I would say, like, the final third of the film is kind of following this conspiracy theory. Or theories. You don't even really know exactly what's going on, but so introducing that aspect to it, it's you really never know what's going on. And
we don't know how honest, you know, going back to the theory, we don't know how honest I think the character's name is Michael. You know, like, we don't really know how honest Michael Newman, we don't really know how honest he's being. We don't really see any proof at any point that he knows what he's doing. He
kind of just shows up.
Like, it's just,
like,
it's
I
one of
saved
those,
you from the
like which is kind of cool. You know, I wouldn't call this a movie that's about conspiracy theories. I actually have two movies, if people are into those, that I would just recommend as a side note, because they're two of my favorites, are Under the Silver Lake, and a recent movie I just saw called Something in the Dirt, which I think just came out in theaters like a few weeks ago, which are explicitly about by Benson and Moorhead is the second one. It's great. But
I haven't seen those.
Like I said, it just came out. I just caught it at a festival. And it was awesome. But those are movies like about conspiracy theories. They're movies about the search for information. And I don't think this movie is really about the search for information. I think there's a brief period of that, but I think it's kind of more the
Jacob is trying.
But
he's really trying.
I think this one, what makes it so kind of grounded and immersive is it's really about the emotional reaction to the unknown. And the kind of fear that comes with the unknown.
Well, also, you don't know if he's going crazy, the main character. So you don't know if he's losing his grip on reality. So that goes into it as well. And it's interesting you mentioned those alternate timelines. There's at least 3 that are going on throughout the film. And people are going to hate me for this comparison. I know it, because I kind of hate myself for it. But it kind of reminded me. Have you seen the show Lost at all?
I haven't seen it, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually never saw it. You know, when it came out in the, what was it, like the early 2000s, it was like a huge deal and everyone watched it. I was like, I'm not watching that. It looks stupid. But I ended up watching it like sort of recently, and there's a lot of comparisons that could be made. That show is known for being sort of frustrating for unanswered questions, but I actually think it kind of over-explained everything to the point where nothing made sense. And there's also alternate timelines going on at the same time. There's actually like a past, a future, and then, now this is a huge spoiler, so I'm not going to get into it too much, but for the last season, they kind of go into another timeline, which is similar to this film. So, strange, but I definitely kind of got that vibe. I wonder if they were influenced at all by this film, because this film did influence a lot of people. You mentioned music videos, and there's video games. There's a video game series, Silent Hill, which apparently was influenced by this film as well. And I mean, you can see the influence of this film kind of all over different surreal imagery that you see, or in horror movies too. You know. Yeah. Since we're talking about horror here. Well,
another one that I kept thinking about, another film that we talked about him last time, but I kept thinking about the movie Mulholland Drive, which I don't know, you know, kind of David Lynch doesn't talk about his influences too much, but I kind of kept coming...
Dreams.
Dreams, but also, you know, this idea of multiple timelines, you know, maybe people being two people, you know, things like that. Like, it's like a character kind of in
dual
one
identities.
Thing is, double identities.
Yeah.
You know, the question, you know, kind of using dreams and horrific imagery to explore a relatively simple idea. And also another film, you know, we talk about influence, that this one called to mind is Enter the Void by Gaspar Noé. I don't know. Have you seen that, Mark?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have seen that.
Which could also,
Yeah.
I know we don't want to, give too much, but could also be another good movie for this series. Just a thing to note.
That might be a good one.
That might be a really good
Yeah.
one because that movie's scary as hell. But anyway, I digress.
It is.
You can definitely see a through line between Jacob's Ladder and some kind of more contemporary movies that
for sure.
Stylistically, but also idealistically, or ideologically, not idealistically, ideologically approach some of the same things.
Yeah. For me, it's one of those movies where like all the different elements really came together. So the directing, the acting, the editing, as you mentioned, which I do want to mention, and the writing. So it was directed by Adrian Lin, who's known mainly for, I wrote steamy thrillers.
Very steamy thrillers.
Which is true. Like Fatal Attraction and Indecent Proposal. So this is sort of a little different for him. He also did a version of the controversial Lolita in 1997, so much after Stanley Kubrick's version. So he had a pretty varied career, and I think he did a really good job here of interpreting Rubin's script. So the film was written by Bruce Joel Rubin, and as you mentioned, Jeremy, there's a lot of allusions to heaven and hell and sort of like biblical, like Old Testament kind of imagery. And apparently that was much more evident in the script for the film, like much more played up. That's something that I researched when I was looking things up about the film. And that was interesting to me that like the demons that you saw in the film, at least in script form, were actual like literal demons that you would see, which is kind of crazy to think about, like, how the movie turned out. And then like seeing this like very literal imagery would be interesting. I don't know if it would be as effective. Probably not. But I really liked how they did it. How they ended up doing it in the film, because apparently when the director started working with the writer, he had these ideas for like these more, grotesque, bizarre visions that couldn't really be defined. And I think that was the right way to go for a lot of reasons. But again, it goes back to the editing as well, where I like that the film, it doesn't linger on any of these visions for too long, right? The ones that Jacob has, like, you really only get glimpses, and to the point where sometimes I would even pause it just to kind of see what I was looking at. Yeah. Because you could miss it, you could miss it really, really easily. But it just makes it more disorienting and horrifying, I think. And that's due to the phenomenal editing. And I looked up the editor's name, but I did not write it down. Because actually, I don't think I could find it on IMDb. I wanted to give a shout out because I can't do that.
It's terrific. It's
it's really phenomenal.
I don't want to say it makes the movie because there's a lot of great elements going on.
Well,
it's essential.
It makes the movie work in a way. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I did find it. So Tom Rolfe is his name. Rolf. Yeah. And let me see what else he. Yeah. Because
not a lot.
The editing.
Not really.
Certainly made it all come together in a way. So Taxi Driver.
Wait, yeah, okay. Yeah, he did do a lot.
Okay.
I guess he did.
Yes.
Which is weird. Actually, that's really interesting because you can kind of feel some very similar, these kind of grimy New York stories.
Yeah.
And I feel like
there is for sure.
that now that we're looking at it, there is kind of that interesting similar thing in Taxi Driver where it kind of passes from scene to scene, without totally grounding you all the time. You can kind of just move through it. So that is kind of interesting.
For sure.
And I wonder if that was a reason that they went for this editor for this.
He also
movie.
edited Heat as well. Yeah. So I mean,
all right. So a big editor. I was
really good.
I was terribly wrong when I said.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
much.
I mean, also I guess Scorsese's known for editing his own films, but I'm sure they work together.
It's interesting too. I guess because Thelma Schoonmaker, I guess, didn't do Taxi Driver, which I didn't realize because she's kind of. But I guess she might have started later with Scorsese. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's what I just assumed. Yeah.
Interesting discovery for both of us. I guess I just never thought about it too much.
That was a real time discovery there. Yeah. Editing is great, and actually found this film, a lot of the editing and the imagery, a lot of it was very similar to David Lynch imagery, which obviously we just talked about with Eraserhead, where like, and I guess what I mean is it's artistic without being overly pretentious or. It's more just like quirky or strange, in a lot of ways. Although I guess some people might find David Lynch pretentious, maybe just because I've watched so many interviews with him and things like that. I just kind of know where he's coming from in a way that's like, he's definitely, I don't think he's trying to be pretentious or anything like that. But But I think he goes with that dreamlike imagery and sort of he goes with the subconscious, which again is sort of how the visions feel in this film, which is appropriate. So also I wanted to mention, well, we mentioned the writer who he also wrote the movie Ghost, which thematically, there's a lot of similarities there. I think it came out either the same year or the following year. Though, and he was a writer who kind of struggled for a while. I was reading about him, and like sort of had a breakthrough with this film. And obviously, Ghost was like a huge film when it came out.
Well, it looks like just looking at his filmography or his Wikipedia and stuff, it looks like he actually wrote Jacob's Ladder well before Ghost, years before.
It was a script.
Yeah, kicked around for a while.
Jacob's Ladder was a script. It was one of those that was kicked around for a while. A lot of people really liked it, but they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah,
is the impression I got. And I also read, I think the director said that it read like a novel more than a script. So I think people were sort of like, maybe intimidated isn't the right word, but
that's kind of interesting because this movie, I would say this movie does have a novel feel to it. It
does. It really does.
That kind of, I mean, even down to the editing, but it was particularly in the writing. I could see how this would translate perfectly to a novel. Exactly. It kind of feels like the way you move through it. The multiple timelines, the way it jumps around, that totally feels like something that would just flawlessly fit the form of a book.
You could almost adapt it like scene for scene into a book, and I think
it would work.
The same.
It would work perfectly.
Yeah, it would work for sure. Although describing the visions, I guess, might be a little trickier. Although I wonder how they are described in the finished script, But so I'm just looking at other things he's done. So a lot of it's in that vein, and then there's Deep Impact, which I did not expect, and Stuart Little 2, which I also did not expect.
Yeah.
But then there's A Time Traveler's Wife. Okay.
Yeah. I'm reading right now. It's saying that he was a student at NYU and was classmates with Martin Scorsese and Brian De Palma, which makes sense. And it actually says that Brian De Palma directed Rubin's first student script. So that would be an interesting find if that's out there anywhere. But it also says he almost failed.
Yeah, because I read that he was in New York, and then he kind of took a leap of faith and made the move out to LA. At the same time, I think I don't know if his manager dropped him or someone declined his script or something major. Some major, I'm sure, disappointment for him happened, but he kind of like took a leap of faith and moved that to LA, and it's like one of those like stories where everything kind of like worked out. Place, he was very lucky. Yeah, everything fell into place, and so it's kind of cool.
But it does say here that he almost failed his screenwriting class due in part to what he considered the confusing, non-intuitive theories on plotting and structure, which is funny because his theories on plotting and structure would be confusing to most. And not intuitive.
It's kind of what makes it.
But that's what makes it so fun and interesting. Unique, it's like because this is definitely this is the farthest from the by the book, save the cat screenwriting structure that you could maybe imagine. But that's what's exciting. That's what makes a good cult
I almost feel like they should. I feel like they should show this film in screenwriting classes or like in film school just to show it like an alternative.
Maybe like the advanced screenwriting class. Once you've seen Indiana Jones and Star Wars, and they've taught you 3-act structure, then
the MacGuffin.
Then be like, all right, now throw all that out the window and try to do something like this because this is just so fun.
I remember in film school they would do that a little bit, but they never showed anything quite like this film. This is a total mind melt of a film. So especially from that script structure standpoint and all of that, but it works. And another thing that makes it work that I wanted to touch on before we close up here, Jeremy, is the performances. Again, I mentioned it before, but I think Tim Robbins is our main character, Jacob, and he does a great job of just playing like that. He plays such a sympathetic character in this film. And he makes it really compelling, like along with the editing and obviously the visuals. He just kind of like he has that. How do you even describe it? Like that element to him where you almost feel like he's walking through a dream. He is like he's going along with everything, but then he also tries to fight back, and then you believe that, but you also believe that he's going crazy and that he's losing his mind. So it's like all of that he makes work in some way, and I think he's a great actor in general. But
I
Tim
think
Robbins
he did a
great job.
I that's one thing I wanted to talk about is just as we this podcast in a way is scholarship if we want to be so bold as to call it that. But like, so as we're constantly working on forming the canon, which anytime you talk film criticism, anyone, from any conversation, that's what you're doing. When you talk to your friends, you're helping to form the canon of what people continue to talk about. And I feel like Tim Robbins is someone who never really gets enough due for just how unbelievably good he is. I think,
I was looking just over his credits and I was like, oh yeah, that one.
Yeah, like I mean, you look at, because I think obviously
he's been in so many good movies.
Yeah, and he's so good. Obviously the movie that comes up the most with him is Shawshank Redemption, but like
Shawshank Redemption, which he is really good in, but
but like this, The Player,
The Players,
Mystic River,
too.
I think
River.
he's right up there with any other actor from his generation, and for some reason just doesn't seem to quite get the same, like, I know we were talking about Daniel Day-Lewis before this.
Yeah, he's
and it's weird to say it because Daniel Day-Lewis, I think, is kind of known for playing these really big, intense power roles. I'm not comparing Tim Robbins to Daniel Day-Lewis, but I think that because Tim Robbins a lot of the time, is playing these kind of more everyman kind of characters. Like, he doesn't get
more
the
subtle.
same... Yeah, like most of his characters kind of feel like these, even in The Player where he's playing a powerful guy, he's playing an executive, he still kind of feels like down on his luck a little bit. Shawshank Redemption kind of down.
He's an underrated actor.
Yeah, like he I think it's that quality where he kind of feels like things go wrong for him. He's not the kind of guy who's forcing himself through the world, which a lot of like De Niro characters do, and a lot of Jack Nicholson characters do.
Yeah, he's...
And I think
he's not like a powerhouse. Like some of these
personality.
Yeah,
he's not a powerhouse personality, but I think he is a powerhouse actor. Like I think in terms of what he's turning in performance wise is right there with those other guys. And I personally I would like more people to talk about Tim Robbins because I just think he's so.
I
good.
agree.
Yeah.
I should talk about him more.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The players like one of my.
It's the best.
I think it's so good, that movie.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a top 10 all time movie for me. I've watched that so many times.
And obviously that's Altman, but I think his performance is
he
really
carries
great in that movie
for
too.
sure.
Makes it all work. Yeah, he does for sure. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, we talked about directing, writing, editing, performances. The last thing I want to touch on here is the effects, because above all, that is what makes this film so unique. And interesting little piece of information I just wanted to end with here is that all the film's special effects sequences were filmed in camera, so there's no use of post-production effects at all, which at the from when the film was made in 1990 you would expect there not to be really any CGI or anything like that, but to know that everything was done completely in camera is like no digital trickery at all, nothing done in post in the edit, other than the editing itself to make these scenes so horrifying. It's just really impressive. And I think a very bold but like the right choice to make, right, for this movie, because of the way that these scenes play out and how brief, like really, like if you put together the runtime of all of these effects, it would really, I can't even imagine it'd be like a minute.
Yeah, it's a lot of just quick flashes.
It's really just quick flashes, sort of subliminal, which is what makes it work with all this imagery. And he used the director Lin used sort of like a body horror technique, which I'm sure many people have seen this done in films where the actors recorded, there's a couple shots where they're shaking their head around but they shoot it at a low frame rate, so it results in this sort of like horrific like fast motion effect when it gets played back. And apparently that Lynn said this was inspired by the art of the painter Francis Bacon.
Oh yeah, that makes total sense.
When he was developing it, and it does make sense.
Which Francis Bacon is like notably one of David Lynch's biggest influences as an artist.
Has he said that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's really into Francis Bacon. So it makes a lot of sense. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So both these films kind of go back to Francis Bacon, I guess.
Yeah. Francis Bacon's the best. He's if you're a horror fan, and you're not deep in the art world, if there's one painter, like I'm very proud of my art history minor, and if there's one painter,
there you go.
I don't get to talk about it a lot, but when I do bring it up, I always will. But if there's one painter, if you're a horror fan, that I would recommend just looking at everything he's done, go study Francis Bacon, because he makes the most paintings don't generally scare people. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty rare, unless it's like, it's, you know,
Yeah.
some painting in an old haunted castle where you're more scared of the space than the painting itself. But like Francis
Yeah.
Bacon paintings, like, you can just stand in front of those and you just feel the kind of eerie, psychotic, strange things that he was cooking up in his mind, and they're really fascinating. So definitely worth taking a look.
I've seen some of his work, but now I want to look up Francis Bacon paintings.
Yeah, I think there's a good documentary on him. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure there's.
Oh, is there? Okay.
It might not be like a full, but one of those 45-minute artist documentaries. Really interesting guy. Really pretty fascinating.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
try to look that up now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Francis Bacon is our summary of both these films so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to discuss with Jacob's Ladder. Although, you know, we always talk about like the moments that stood out to us. I guess out of all these visions, Jeremy, that he has, did any of these scenes stand out to you the most, or stick with you the most? Out of any of them?
I mean, we've hit on a lot of the kind of the big notable ones. What I want to talk about is just there was a jump scare, which there aren't a lot of jump scares in this movie. You know, there are a few, but there's one moment with Jezebel when Jacob's, I don't remember exactly where it comes in the movie and what it's following, but he's kind of having a crisis moment. And she kind of just grabs him and shakes him and, like, you know, is saying, like, Jacob, like, what's going on? And really quickly, there's this one cut where her eyes are just totally black. Like, her pupils are just dilated. And it's, like,
wow.
it's, like, 2 seconds long.
I think I missed that, actually.
Yeah.
When I was
And
watching
I don't know. For me, like, you know, I'm not a big jump scare person. Well, that's not true. I'm a big jump scare person when they're done well. So, like, I don't want to say I'm not a big jump scare person, but I think that, you know, there's a lot of discussion about, you know, the place of jump scares in horror films. And I think, you know, I think it's one of those things where when a jump scare is done well, it's amazing. And I think there's kind of a right and a wrong way to do it.
If
and
it's not overused, I guess.
If it's not overused, or if it's kind of purposeful, you know, like in my mind, a good jump scare is either subtle, where it can happen kind of randomly and not have a big payoff, but it has to happen in a way where
it should
it's
be
not
some sort of reason.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or it's not necessarily like just there to make you jump out of your seat. It's there because it's scary, like genuinely scary. It's not just to make you jump. And I think this one was great because it's a subtle jump scare, but it really kind of got me. Like I found myself just jumping back from the screen a little bit. And it's quick, and it's not the scariest moment of the movie, but it just was really unsettling to me and reinforced that tone of yeah. And I think in general, you know, I mean, it's not a moment, but I really like the actress who played Jezebel is Elizabeth Pena, and I thought she really gave a terrific performance. And I think a lot of the scenes with her are kind of easy to overlook because of all the crazy other stuff going on.
Yeah.
But I think she really brought an interesting degree of naturalism to the film. There's one moment where she like kisses Jacob and gets a little bit of shaving cream on her face, and while he's shaving, and she kind of laughs, and it's just such a natural laugh, but you kind of don't trust her totally, but she's also really kind of sweet, and I feel like she played it so well in terms of finding that balance where you're not sure where she sits in the story, which is difficult. I think she really turned in a great performance.
She has moments where you're like, she has moments where you're just like, this is a horrible person. Like, why is she saying these things and doing this?
Like,
but,
is she cruel? Is she sweet? Is she love him?
Yeah, but then there are moments like
him?
that, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like a little more sweet, and you're like, okay, I could see, you know, why these two would be together, why he would endure this.
Yeah.
No, she was really good in it as well. Again, like all the performances are really good, and for me, like the moments that stand out, like, you know, in terms of effects or visions that he has. Oddly enough, I mean, the dance scene's pretty notorious.
Yeah,
I feel
the
like
party.
You know, the tails. The party scene. Sorry, but the one that kind of sticks with me the most, I guess, would be like, oddly enough, it's not overly done in any way. Like, you couldn't even call it a creature. It's almost like one of those. It's like like a nylon or you know, like a stocking put over someone's face.
Yeah.
It has that sort of a. It's like when one of the faces out of the back of the car, I believe, when the car is the car. Yeah, and it's like you only see it for a moment, of course, just like all the other images. But there's something about this one. It's just like it's very disturbing, very haunting. It's like you kind of like see someone's face, but it's only through this sort of stocking mask that he's wearing, and it's like very like tightly pulled around him. And it's again the person's like screaming and. So again, thematically, this is sort of like a heavy one, but I think it certainly plays into a lot of the aspects that we talk about when we talk about cult films on this show, and which is what we do. So makes sense. But I think it's like, it's a very heavy movie, but the way it plays it is very intriguing and makes it very unique and different. Like, because if you just were throwing these thematic elements at the viewer without any of this other, any of the other techniques or things that we talked about going on, I think it would be a little heavy and maybe even heavy-handed in the wrong hands. But no, I mean, I think all the elements came together on this one and made it work. And as always, well, not always, but as many times when we talk about different cult films on the show, it does have a remake. Also being remade Ghost, apparently. I just saw that. So, yeah, Jacob's Ladder, there was a remake in 2019, which I have not seen and didn't know existed
kind of
until
flown under the radar a little bit. But
we did this episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but
no
I mean,
idea.
good to know.
But
I think that
hopefully they did it. Hopefully it's in the tradition at least of this film.
Yeah, who knows? But I will say I think that this movie is a great cult movie. I think it's kind of like
it is
the definition of a cult movie.
Also, just a great film.
Yeah. Yeah, great movie, really well done.
Like,
and even down to we talk about what makes a cult movie, which is the forever ongoing debate on this show.
The eternal question.
The eternal question, what makes a cult movie? And, this one of the things we've said before is a movie that kind of maybe didn't hit immediately and then slowly found its audience over time.
Yeah.
And this is
that's
one
exactly
of those.
What happened.
Yeah, this movie wasn't a big hit when it started, and it was one of those ones that, we talk about the definition of a cult is something that you kind of can't resist and need to keep coming back to. And I think this is one of those movies that just has that it's kind of endlessly watchable, and you can't just watch it once. You have to come back to it at a certain point.
Yeah, you can't. You really can't. It's one of those films that, like, at least I personally, I sought out because of the cred that it has. I just heard people talking about it or whatever, and from a film standpoint, and then but it's a slow burn. It is like it took me years to really realize how great this film is. I knew it was good, at the time, but rewatching it was essential. I felt like for this one. I don't always feel that way, but that's why, again, like we said, like cult films, like these are films that are meant to be sort of watched over and over in a way, and that's sort of how they gain their notoriety as well. Yeah, so
it's a pretty fascinating.
Certainly fits the bill. Yeah. So that is going to end our discussion on Jacob's Ladder. We'll be back next time with another film that's sort of horror, but not really. Another non-horror film. But for now, thank you so much for listening to Cult Movie Cult. You can find us on the usual social media. If you have any cult films you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, or if you'd like to officially join the cult, be a guest on the show, please feel free to reach out to us at cultmoviecult@gmail.com. This has been Cult Movie Cult, and until next time, so long from the other side.